Secretary Hegseth, those soldiers told the truth. Those soldiers are braver than you are.
I commend them.
They are asking for accountability. They deserve accountability, and I'm asking for the same, starting with you. And as I said a year ago, you need to resign immediately.
I commend those.
The day after 6 American soldiers were killed in a drone strike at a base in Kuwait, Pete Hegseth stood at the Pentagon podium and called it a single squirter that slipped through fortified defenses. Survivors of that same attack later told reporters on the record that the position was never fortified. One soldier said the base's drone defense capability was, quote, none. Both of those descriptions cannot be true. Representative Patrick Ryan, a combat veteran with 2 Bronze Stars, didn't ask Hegseth about strategy. He asked him directly, are the soldiers who survived this lying? He laid out the numbers Hegseth couldn't get around. The Shahed 136 drone has a range of several hundred miles, and the base sat well under 100 miles from Iran, on a site U.S. intelligence had already flagged as indefensible before the war even started. I'm Caleb Morgan. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button because we do not flinch and we do not let that slide.
Command.
Let's get into it.
There anyway. Is that true or false? True or false? Straightforward question.
Are you going to give me a chance to answer or just play gotcha?
Did you send them there or not?
We took proactive measures from the beginning to ensure force protection and defensive posture were maximized across the theater.
Let's talk about what defenses they had. Prior to the attack, officers on the ground knew our troops were vulnerable. In fact, they requested additional force protection. Did they receive it?
Wherever humanly possible, force protection and counter UAS was always made available.
They did not. In fact, when asked to describe the base's defense, one survivor who's come forward from the unit said, quote, I would put it in the none category. From a drone defense capability, none. So let's be clear, no counter-drone capabilities, no counter-rocket systems, no counter-mortar or counter-artillery, not even the basic overhead protection that you and I had 20 years ago in Iraq, and now 6 of our soldiers are dead. The next day, you downplayed the attack. You said it was a squirter that squeaked through fortified defenses. But since then, thankfully, brave survivors have come forward to set the record straight. One of our surviving soldiers told CBS, quote, painting a picture that one squeaked through is a falsehood. Another said the unit was, quote, unprepared to provide any defense for itself. It was not a fortified position. Another survivor said the building's protection was about as weak as one gets. Secretary Hegseth, that is obviously in direct contradiction to what you said from the Pentagon podium the next day. So are you saying that these soldiers, our soldiers who survived this horrific attack, are lying?
What I'm saying is before the commencement of the conflict, we put in maximum defensive posture. We 70
they said,
in this directing. Can I speak, or are you just going to monologue falsehoods all over the place?
It's not a falsehood.
We moved 7,500 troops off of the X based on the intel.
Stop.
Based on the intel.
Stop. Reclaiming my time.
Because you yell doesn't make you right. Just because you yell doesn't make you right.
I'm reclaiming my time on behalf of these survivors. You just said what they said is a falsehood.
There's a much larger picture.
True?
There's a much larger picture at play here that included integrated air defenses, bunkers, moving people off the X
why, Mr. Secretary,
to ensure that they were not part of the target. We moved those troops and all across the theater, thousands of troops off the X, off of their bases, because we knew what Iran was going to try to strike, and we knew there could be a tragic moment. There could be a tragic moment where something could get through. Of course, that's the consequence of conflict, and we remember those 6 every single day.
I want to finish.
But don't play games with.
I'm not playing games. I want to finish with one more quote from a survivor of the attack, and I put this on the record. Telling the truth is important, and we're not going to learn from these mistakes if we pretend these mistakes didn't happen. Secretary Hegseth, those soldiers told the truth. Those soldiers are braver than you are.
I commend them.
They are asking for accountability. They deserve accountability, and I'm asking for the same, starting with you. And as I said a year ago, you need to resign immediately.
I commend those soldiers.
From Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk briefly about the current U.S. doctrine and conduct of the administration in a particular event and a series of events, actually. As everybody in the dais and the witness table is aware, the Department of Defense Law of War Manual specifies that any order to kill shipwrecked persons in an illegal order would constitute a war crime. It isn't suggested there's a specific example to show a clear-cut example of what this entails in our own manual. With that in mind, let's look back a few weeks ago when a fishing crew ended a long day of hard fishing, scoring a full stock of albacore and swordfish on board. Without any warning or expectation, this small Ecuadorian fishing vessel, operating about 200 nautical miles off the Galapagos Islands, was militarily engaged by U.S. forces. It was hit once, then it was hit again. Not a warning shot, not an interdiction, 2 drone strikes. Survivors described chaos and severe injuries. Our U.S. forces then handcuffed the crew at gunpoint, placed black hoods over their heads, seized and scrubbed their devices, and then held them for days. Ultimately, the crew was released, given there was no evidence to support any narco activity or any charges that may be against them. So to recap, we struck a vessel, we struck it again, set fire to it as it was sinking. And as public reports say, even drank their beer. We detained the survivors, and then we let them go. This should be eye-opening. Now let's go to another example, the double tap or 2-strike attack that took place on September 2nd in the Caribbean. A vessel was struck, disabled, and then struck again, killing all but 2 survivors that were left clinging to the wreckage. And this is the thing. We know this happened. We know how it happened. And the Defense Department still refuses to release the follow-up video of the killing of the shipwrecked survivors, even though they released the initial one to the public in major news networks worldwide. No difference in sources and methods in the 2 videos, but still not released to the public. Of course, the backlash was severe at the time and perhaps is being forgotten. An unpredictable but ennoble display of character from this administration. Fingers were pointed at one another as everyone scurried to cover, in a tacit acknowledgement that this was an issue potentially violating international law. Now, I've reviewed what's been available, the phony rationale that these attacks are about fentanyl trafficking, when we know fentanyl comes from China, India, through Mexico. Then the baseless argument that this was about narco-terrorism. You know, I don't believe a word of it. This was to create leverage for regime change in Venezuela. And now the president acknowledged that was about oil. Beyond the simple need for justice and exercising American values, it's important for us to discuss what the U.S. belligerence in the world stage means to our security, our ability to marshal cooperation with our allies, and most importantly, not to normalize these actions that could endanger the lives of our own service members put in similar peril. One thing, whether it's these particular strikes discussed here, the one that killed 11 others off the coast of Venezuela, whether it's the 178 other killings, with each of these extrajudicial killings, the administration is pirating American values. We'll continue to investigate this. We will. It'll come forward in the future. Some days that second video will be released. But we've got to stop also using our precious resources that are being taxed so heavily all over the world on actions that hurt our military. They hurt our military and they hurt our standing internationally, and they're hurting our standard here at home. I hope that we can move forward. I hope we can review whether these are justified, because I found no justification. We were given classified information on the second strike. I can't discuss it, but I must tell you, it's the most convoluted bullshit I ever heard in my life. This should be public. This is our...
Let's start with the number that should be the first thing anyone remembers from this hearing. 6 American soldiers killed in a drone strike at a base in Kuwait. Reservists from Iowa, Florida, Nebraska, Minnesota, and California, over 30 more wounded, and the very next day, the Secretary of Defense went in front of the country and described what happened as one drone slipping through fortified protection. A squirter, in his words. That word choice matters because it implies the defenses worked and one threat got lucky. What the survivors actually described was the opposite of that. Listen to what Ryan puts on the record from the people who were actually there. One survivor describing the base's drone defense capability in exactly 2 words. None. Category. No counter-drone systems, no counter-rocket systems, no counter-mortar, no counter-artillery, not even the basic overhead protection that soldiers had in Iraq 2 decades ago. Another survivor told CBS directly that the one squirter slip-through description was, in his words, a falsehood. A third said the position was never fortified to begin with. These aren't anonymous critics. These are the men who were standing in that building when it was hit, going on the record, by name, to correct what their own Secretary of Defense told the country. And then Ryan does something that should have ended this exchange right there. He gets specific about distance and capability, the 2 facts that strip away any ambiguity. The Shahed 136 drone has a range of several hundred miles. The base sat well under 100 miles from Iran, and before the war even started, U.S. intelligence had already flagged that exact site as high on Iran's target list and explicitly called it indefensible against aerial attack. The recommendation, according to Ryan, was not to use it. It was used anyway. That's not confusion in the fog of war. That's a documented warning that existed before a single shot was fired and a decision made anyway to proceed. So when Ryan asks Hegseth the most direct question possible, are the soldiers who survived this lying? Watch what Hegseth actually does with that question. He doesn't answer it. He pivots to a broader narrative about moving 7,500 troops off exposed positions across the theater, about integrated air defenses and bunkers, about the general difficulty of protecting every position in a conflict zone. All of that might be true as a broader operational picture, but none of it answers the specific question in front of him. Did this specific base, where 6 men died, have the defenses he described to the country the next day, or didn't it? Ryan doesn't let him escape into the bigger picture, because the bigger picture isn't what killed these 6 men. The absence of basic defenses at this specific site is what killed them. And that's when Ryan delivers the line that defines this entire hearing. Those soldiers told the truth, and those soldiers are braver than you are. That's not political theatre. That's a combat veteran, someone who has buried people he served with, telling a sitting Secretary of Defense that the men who lived through this attack have shown more courage in coming forward than the man responsible for sending them there has shown in taking accountability for it. Now, the hearing didn't stop there, and it's worth understanding why Ryan's colleague, Representative Keating, brought in a separate set of incidents involving U.S. strikes on vessels in international waters and Ecuadorian fishing. Boats struck by drones and its crew detained without any evidence ever surfacing to justify it, and a separate strike where survivors were reportedly struck a second time while still in the water. Keating raises these not as proven war crimes, but as serious documented incidents that the Defense Department has refused to fully explain, including declining to release follow-up video that Keating says exists, even after releasing an earlier video from a related incident. Keating's broader argument is that the pattern matters. When an administration is willing to shift its stated justification for lethal force multiple times and withhold evidence the public has already seen part of, that raises legitimate questions about how seriously accountability is actually being taken at every level, not just in Kuwait. Step back and look at the through line connecting all of it. A defense secretary who described a fatal attack in terms directly contradicted by the survivors who lived through it. Officers on the ground who requested additional protection and, according to Ryan, didn't receive it. And a broader pattern raised independently by another member of Congress of incidents where the full record hasn't been made public, even when it apparently already exists. Whatever you conclude about the broader allegations, the core of Ryan's exchange stands on its own, documented, on the record. Soldiers said one thing happened, Their Secretary of Defense said another. And when asked directly whether they were lying, he never actually said no. So tell me what you think. Does Hegseth owe these families a direct answer, or was Ryan out of line, pushing this hard in a public hearing? Drop your take in the comments. If you want more of these hearings, broken all the way down, facts first, no spin, no letting it slide. Hit subscribe. I'm Caleb Morgan, and I'll see you in the next one.